The next prophecy we want to look at is found in another prophet, the prophet Ezekiel. Now, Ezekiel is copious with his prophecies in relation to the nation of Israel, and I want to look at one of them in particular, and that is what's found in the 36th chapter of the prophecy by Ezekiel. The important thing again here is that Ezekiel didn't make this up. Ezekiel didn't decide what he wanted to say. God told him what to say. Now, these prophecies are probably, again, 2,500 years old, probably a little less than that, but very, very important. By this time, the nation of Israel had been carried away into captivity in Babylon. And Ezekiel was in the land of the Babylonians, and he's giving prophecies in relation to what the future of Israel was to be in the long term. So we find there, when we first come to the prophecy of the 36th chapter of Ezekiel, we find there in verse 19 where he makes this comment, "And I scattered them among the nations," or the heathen as we have it in the King James Version, "and they were dispersed through the countries according to their ways, and according to their doings I judged them. And when they entered into the nations," or the heathen, "whither they went, they profaned my holy name, when they said to them, These are the people of the Lord, and are gone forth out of his land." And that's past. That's what's happened in the past, when they went out of the land. Verse 21 says, "But I had pity on my holy name, which the house of Israel had profaned among the heathens, whither they went." So God had pity on them. He sent them into the lands, other lands. So in the pity, what was the pity that how was he going to pity them? We find that the answer for that is found in the following verses. In verse 24, "For I will take you from among the nations and gather you out of all countries and will bring you into your own land." Now, again, I used this expression a few times. What words there don't you understand? Isn't it plain, simple, straightforward? There's no mysticism about it. There's no ifs or maybes or it could mean something else. It's plain, simple language. I'll scatter you. I'll have pity on you. I'll bring you back into your own land. Now that's happened. He's brought them back into their own land. The next part of the prophecy, however, is future. So I'll draw your attention to the future of what will happen to Israel. "Then I will sprinkle clean water upon you, and ye shall be clean. From all your filthiness and from all your idols will I cleanse you. A new heart will I give you, and a new spirit I'll put within you. I'll take away your stony heart of flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. And I'll put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, to keep my judgments and to do them." That isn't Israel today. There's no new spirit within them. There's no desire to keep the commandments of God. There's no cleansing from iniquity and sin. They are still a nation as sinful as any other nation upon the face of the earth. But this prophecy says the ultimate end, having brought them back, is to cleanse them and to make them my people. We then go on in verse 28. "And ye shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and ye shall be my people, and I will be your God." Again, here's the ultimate end. Now, don't take as if I'm taking a passage from here and a passage from there. Read the whole chapter and see whether or not in context this is what it is saying. Now, he further goes on in the 37th chapter to make similar prophecies, except he uses different kinds of words, and I draw your attention to those. So when we go to the 37th chapter, he's given a vision, and the vision is a valley of dry bones, and he sees the bones come together, and the bones get sinews, and finally they get flesh upon them. They stand up on their feet, and he classifies them therefore a great and a mighty army. Now, that's a marvellous prophecy about bones coming together, standing up. What's that all about? Read the whole chapter and you'll get more detail. But what he's saying is that the dry bones are the house of Israel. We find that when we read verse 11. Then said he unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried, our hope is lost, and we are cut off from our people. That's with Israel in dispersion. How are they ever going to recover the land? How are they ever going to get back into the land of Israel and be restored as a nation? They had no power, they had no political, they had no army, they had nothing. But this word says that they're going to. So how's it going to be done? Verse 12. Therefore prophesy and say to them, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, O my people, I will open your graves, cause you to come out of your graves, and bring you into the land of Israel, and ye shall know that I am the Lord. So here is Israel, without hope, dead as it were, scattered amongst the nations. And God says, don't fear. I'll bring you all together. I'll stand you up. The nation will be brought back together and will stand again as an individual nation. Read the whole chapter. That's what it's saying. Remember, this is prophesied 2,500 years ago. He further goes on in another analogy in verse 21, where he says there's two nations, the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom. One was called the kingdom of Ephraim or Israel, and the other one was called the kingdom of Judah in the south. They were separated, had been separated for nearly 400 years as individual kings on both sides. God says the time is coming when instead of there being two nations, there's only going to be one nation. So he tells us in the 37th chapter and at verse 21. And say unto them, Thus saith the Lord, Behold, I'll take the children of Israel from among the nations whither they be gone, gather them on every side, and bring them into their own land. And I'll make them one nation in the land of Israel upon the mountains of Israel. One king shall be king to them all, and they shall no more be two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms any more. Now, part of that's happened because they've been brought back into the land. There's not two nations in the land at the moment. There's only one, called the kingdom of Israel. But the interesting part is this prophecy also says, I will give them one king. Now, they're not a kingdom. They are a democratic nation. There's no king. Yet this passage is yet therefore in the future. Who is the king that will set up and be over the two nations? The question should be blatantly obvious. Okay? Jesus. When they crucified him, put a sign above his cross which said, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. And he was. Art thou a king, said Pilate? Thou sayest it. So Jesus was the King of the Jews. So the restored nation of Israel, as one nation upon the mountains of Israel, yet awaits the coming of her King. Hasn't come yet. Jesus of Nazareth is in heaven, sitting at the Father's side. As the prophet tells us when Peter, in Acts chapter 3, tells us that he must remain in heaven until all things that are spoken of by the prophets come to pass. What are the things spoken of by the prophets? Jeremiah 30, Ezekiel 37, Ezekiel 36, the restored nation of Israel, back in the land, awaiting the return of their king. And yet there is another part yet to be revealed that's not revealed in either of those chapters that we've looked at. And we'll look at that in our next video.